Hi, Capricorn. The energy around this reading feels really intense. Like someone is finally starting to realize just how deeply afraid they are of losing you. They miss your energy. They miss the peace they felt around you. They miss the version of love that once felt so natural before everything became complicated. But the one thing they can't stop thinking about is why it took your silence for them to finally wake up. Capricorn isn't explaining as much anymore. You're not chasing the way you used to. And somehow, that quiet distance has made them see everything differently. It feels like this person is beginning to realize you were never weak. You were simply too patient with someone who didn't fully understand your value yet. And the strangest part is, they've been feeling it the most during the moments when you became quieter. No more long messages. No more trying to explain every emotion you felt. No more constantly being the one holding everything together before it fell apart. Capricorn just feels tired now. Tired of always having to be the more emotionally mature one in a connection that never truly felt balanced. And honestly, I think that shift is what finally started to scare this person. The Eight of Cups carries the energy of someone slowly walking away from something that's been hurting them for far too long. Not loudly, not out of revenge, just a very quiet departure. Sometimes the thing that wakes people up isn't a huge fight. It's the moment they realize you've stopped trying to hold on to them. It feels like this person always believed you would stay, that you would keep understanding them, keep giving them one more chance. But lately, your energy feels different. You've started pulling your emotions back. You've started choosing peace instead of trying to win conversations that never really go anywhere. And they can't ignore that anymore. The Judgment card brings in a very strong awakening here. It feels like this person is looking back at the way they treated you, through completely different eyes now. The things they once took for granted have suddenly become the very things they regret the most. They miss the way you always tried to listen, even when you were exhausted too. They miss the peace they felt around you. They miss the way Capricorn loves, quietly, deeply, without needing to constantly prove it. And I think what hurts them the most is realizing they only truly understood your value once they felt this distance growing between you. The Five of Cups feels filled with unspoken regret, like someone replaying everything they lost and wondering if they pushed things too far this time. Maybe in the past they always assumed you would stay, that no matter how cold they became, no matter how many times they disappeared, you would still open your heart to them the same way. But Capricorn doesn't carry that energy anymore. You still care, but you're no longer sacrificing your peace just to hold on to someone who isn't ready to grow. And honestly, that's exactly what's making them see you differently now. Not in a reckless, impulsive kind of way, but with respect, with the realization that they could actually be losing someone who truly mattered to them. The Hermit shows up very strongly in this reading. It feels like two people sitting inside a long silence, but somehow that silence is making every emotion clearer than ever before. Capricorn isn't reacting the same way anymore. You're choosing silence, choosing distance, choosing to protect your energy for things that truly deserve it. And this person is finally beginning to understand that your silence was never weakness. It was the moment you stopped trying to save someone who didn't yet know how to hold on to you. And honestly, I think it's inside that silence that this person has started seeing themselves more clearly than ever before. There's no one there soothing their emotions anymore. No Capricorn quietly standing behind them, holding everything together just to keep this connection alive. For the first time, it feels like they're truly being forced to sit with themselves. And that hasn't been easy at all. The Devil shows up very strongly here, but not in a dark or extreme way. It feels more like someone beginning to realize that their habits, their ego, their emotional avoidance have cost them a lot more than they were willing to admit. Maybe they once believed distance made them safe, that pretending not to care meant they couldn't get hurt, or that always staying in control of the relationship somehow made them stronger. But the quieter things became, the more they felt you slipping out of their life, the more they realized that what they called control was really just fear. Fear of truly opening up. Fear of being seen at their most vulnerable. Fear of loving someone more deeply than they planned to. And I think what hurts them most is realizing how hard you tried to love them with a mature heart. Capricorn isn't the kind of person who loves through grand speeches. You love through presence, through consistency, through quietly staying. But sometimes, people only understand the value of peace after they're the ones who destroyed it. The Seven of Swords carries the energy of someone who spent a long time hiding from themselves, hiding their real feelings, hiding their pain. Sometimes even convincing themselves they didn't need you as much as they actually did. But the more they tried to run from those emotions, the stronger those feelings kept returning. There are moments now when they miss you in the smallest, most ordinary ways. An old song, a familiar street, or simply the emptiness at the end of a long day, when there's no one left who truly understands them. And honestly, I think the hardest realization for them is knowing you gave them so many chances to grow beside you. But back then, they were still trapped inside themselves. The Death card carries a very deep transformation here. Not necessarily an ending, but the slow collapse of an older version of who they used to be. The old ego, the old emotional distance, the behaviors that once convinced them they were fine on their own. It feels like this person is finally starting to understand that maturity isn't about always appearing strong. Sometimes it's about being honest enough to face the ways you've hurt someone else. And deep down, they know they caused you far more pain than you ever allowed yourself to say out loud. Capricorn rarely expresses every emotion when hurt. You just become quieter, a little more distant, a little colder. But somehow, that small shift inside you is exactly what started unraveling something inside them. The King of Cups feels like someone trying to understand their own emotions for the very first time. Maybe they still don't fully know how to express everything yet. Maybe they're still holding a lot inside. Maybe they're still afraid of facing you directly. But for the first time, they're no longer running from those feelings. They're beginning to look at everything with a softer heart, slower, more honest, and much more emotionally aware than before. But I think what confuses them the most is that just as they're finally starting to open their heart, Capricorn isn't standing still waiting for them anymore. It feels like you've changed a lot in silence. Not in a way that tries to prove something to anyone, more like the kind of growth that comes after swallowing your emotions for far too long. You're beginning to understand that not everyone you love knows how to hold that love properly. And ever since that realization settled in, your energy has felt completely different. The Queen of Swords carries the energy of a Capricorn, slowly reclaiming their boundaries. You don't react immediately every time they appear and disappear anymore. You're not constantly explaining why you're hurt. And you're no longer placing your entire heart into the hands of someone who still doesn't fully understand what stable love looks like. On the outside, you probably still seem calm, still gentle when you speak, still carrying that familiar composure people know you for. But deep down, you've started quietly closing the doors that once stayed open for them no matter what happened. And this person feels that. Honestly, I don't think what scares them is the idea that you're angry. It's the feeling that you may truly be learning how to live peacefully without needing them anymore. It's the kind of distance that stays very quiet, but keeps people awake far longer than any argument ever could. The Four of Cups feels like someone sitting alone with a heavy sense of regret. Looking back at every moment, they missed the chance to understand you more deeply, to love you better. There are times now when they remember how hard you tried to keep this connection alive with every ounce of sincerity you had. But back then, they were too consumed by their own emotions to really see it. Capricorn doesn't love halfway, and you don't fully open your heart to just anyone. So when you slowly started pulling your energy back, that's when this person realized how deeply they had actually been loved. The Nine of Wands carries a very specific energy here. Like someone who has endured for too long, stayed strong for too long, and now they no longer want to keep sacrificing themselves just to hold together a relationship that survives only through one-sided effort. Honestly, I don't think Capricorn wants to save anyone anymore at this stage. You're choosing peace now. Choosing restful sleep over exhausting conversations. Choosing the freedom to be yourself instead of constantly reshaping yourself just to feel loved properly. And strangely enough, the more you step back like this, the more this person feels pulled toward you. Not because you changed for attention, but because for the first time, they can truly feel the possibility of losing you. The Strength card shows up beautifully in this reading, not as loud strength, not as winning through control or words, but as the strength of someone who finally learned how to place themselves first. Capricorn still has feelings. I honestly don't think those feelings ever fully disappeared, but now, you're beginning to understand that mature love doesn't always mean staying, no matter what. Sometimes, it means knowing when to go quiet, knowing when to stop carrying everything alone, and knowing when your heart deserves more protection than sacrifice. And somehow, that's exactly what's making this person see you differently now. Not as someone who will always wait for them anymore, but as someone they may have understood far too late. And honestly, I think that feeling is exactly what's starting to change something very deep inside of them. Not the kind of change meant to impress anyone, and not the kind of temporary emotion that appears and fades away overnight. It feels more like someone growing tired of their old self, tired of shallow connections, tired of constantly running from real emotions, tired of believing that freedom meant never truly attaching to anyone, because the more life they move through, the more they realize not everyone brings the kind of peace that Capricorn once brought into their world. The Knight of Wands feels like someone who used to live completely through impulse, always moving, always searching for the next distraction, the next feeling, the next thing that could temporarily fill the emptiness inside. Maybe they once enjoyed being chased, enjoyed the freedom of never being tied down, or believed they had endless time to come back and fix things later. But sometimes, the person who truly makes us want to stop running only appears a few times in a lifetime. And I think this person is finally beginning to understand that now. There are moments when they remember how quietly Capricorn cared for them. No dramatic speeches, no huge promises, just steady presence. And honestly, I don't think they understood the value of that kind of stability before, not until their own life started feeling too chaotic to carry anymore. The Tower brings in the energy of an older version of themselves collapsing. Not necessarily because everything around them disappeared overnight, but because the beliefs they once lived by no longer feel right anymore. The things that used to excite them now feel empty. The relationships that once distracted them no longer feel emotionally real. And somewhere in the middle of all that, they keep thinking about Capricorn more and more, not just as someone they had feelings for, but as a place where they once felt safe being fully themselves. And that kind of feeling is rare, especially for someone who spent most of their life hiding emotions behind distance, busyness, or emotional walls. The Ace of Pentacles shows up beautifully here. It feels like the first time this person has started thinking more seriously about their future. Not just living moment to moment anymore. Not just chasing temporary emotions that disappear as quickly as they arrive. But quietly wondering what a truly stable life could look like with the right person beside them. And interestingly enough, Capricorn makes them think about that a lot. Not through pressure, not by forcing them to change, but simply through the way you've always stayed true to your values. You never had to chase anyone to prove you were worthy of love. You just kept building your life quietly, piece by piece. And somehow, that's exactly what's making this person rethink the entire direction of their life now. The Wheel of Fortune feels like an inner cycle slowly beginning to shift inside them. Like they're standing between two versions of themselves. One version, afraid of attachment, always running the moment emotions became too real. And another version, that's beginning to crave staying longer with the things that actually bring peace. Maybe they still don't fully know what to do with all these feelings yet, but at the very least, they no longer want to keep living the way they used to. And sometimes, that alone is the hardest transformation a person can go through. Because after all the noise outside of us, sometimes the hardest thing is still sitting alone with yourself in complete silence. And honestly, I think this person is going through a season like that right now. A very long silence, a very deep one, and not an easy one to escape from. The moon carries the feeling of emotions that have been buried for far too long finally beginning to rise to the surface. The fears they tried to avoid. The wounds they kept pretending they had already healed from. Even the loneliness they never truly admitted to anyone else. There are nights when they feel exhausted, but still can't sleep peacefully. Their mind keeps drifting back to old conversations, old moments between the two of you. Things Capricorn once said that they didn't fully listen to at the time. And honestly, I think what haunts them most is realizing you saw the hurt inside them long before they did, even when they acted cold, even when they pretended not to need anyone, even when they kept everything feeling casual on the surface. Capricorn still saw through all of it, not because you wanted to change them, but because you understood them more deeply than they realized. And sometimes, being truly seen by someone who still chooses to stay beside you anyway becomes the hardest thing to lose. The Ten of Wands carries a very heavy exhaustion here. Not just exhaustion from work or life itself, but the kind that comes from constantly forcing yourself to be the version of you that you think everyone else expects to see. It feels like this person became so used to being strong, always in control, always appearing fine. But over time, it's becoming harder and harder for them to keep pretending, especially after Capricorn started stepping back. That distance feels almost like a mirror now, forcing them to face things they avoided for a very long time. Feelings they thought were long buried are suddenly coming back very clearly. Regret, guilt, and the fear that they may have hurt someone who genuinely loved them far more than they deserved. The Four of Swords feels like someone trying to pull away from the chaos around them just to finally think clearly. Showing up less, talking less, but internally going through an enormous emotional shift. And honestly, I don't think this awakening happened all at once. It feels more like someone slowly realizing that The things they once believed were enough for them never actually brought peace to their heart. And strangely enough, the deeper they move through this phase, the more they miss Capricorn's energy. Not because you were perfect, but because around you, they never had to pretend to be someone else. The star appears very beautifully here, like a small light returning after a very emotionally heavy period. A quiet feeling that maybe there's still room for them to become a better version of themselves. Not to hold on to someone at all costs, but to stop losing real things simply because fear kept making the decisions for them. And honestly, I think Capricorn became an important part of that realization without even trying to. Not through lectures, not through forcing growth, but simply through the way you stayed true to your own heart, your calmness, your maturity. Even the way you quietly walked away once you became too exhausted to keep carrying everything alone. All of it made this person start looking at themselves in a completely different way. And the more they reflect on everything, the more they realize there's something about Capricorn that's actually very rare to find. Peace. Not the kind of connection that burns intensely and disappears just as quickly. Not the kind of love that keeps people constantly wondering what the other person is really feeling. Around you, everything always felt real, clear, mature, safe. And honestly, I don't think this person fully understood the value of that before. Maybe they were used to relationships filled with emotion but lacking stability, used to connections that arrived fast and faded just as quickly. Or maybe they always believed love had to feel dramatic to be real. But the older they become, the more they're starting to realize that what truly makes someone want to stay long-term is the feeling of peace they experience around another person. And Capricorn carries that energy so naturally. The Queen of Pentacles feels like someone who instinctively knows how to care for the things they love, without needing attention, without making huge promises, just quiet consistency. The way you always tried to keep things balanced. The way you showed love more through actions than words. The way you tried to make the people you loved feel safe, even during the times you were emotionally exhausted yourself. And honestly, I think this person misses all of that deeply now, especially during the moments when they feel disconnected from their own life. There are times when they realize so many people have passed through their world, but very few ever stayed with the kind of sincere heart Capricorn once gave them. The Six of Cups carries such a deep nostalgic energy here. Old memories returning softly, but touching the exact emotions they've tried so hard to hide. A small conversation. A moment when you quietly stayed beside them while they were struggling. Or simply the feeling of being understood without needing to explain everything. Sometimes, people don't realize how precious something is until distance begins to grow. And honestly, I think what moves them the most is realizing that even after all the hurt, Capricorn never loved them in a toxic or controlling way. You never tried to turn them into someone else. Never forced them to be perfect. You simply wanted both of you to grow into better versions of yourselves together. Temperance carries such a beautiful healing energy between the two of you. Not healing through grand words, not through fantasy, but through the feeling of finally becoming calm again after emotional chaos. This person is beginning to understand that mature love isn't always filled with emotional highs and intensity. Sometimes, it's simply having someone in your life who makes you want to become a better version of yourself. And honestly, I think Capricorn did that for them without even trying. Not by rescuing them, but by staying deeply connected to your own values and your own heart. The Empress carries the energy of someone people only fully appreciate after they begin to lose them. Maybe in the past they believed you would always stay. Always forgive one more time. Always wait for them to finally grow up emotionally. But now, they're starting to understand that people like Capricorn don't appear very often in life. Someone both strong and gentle, both emotionally mature and deeply sincere. Someone who, even after being hurt, still tries to love from the best parts of themselves. And honestly, it feels like this person is slowly realizing that what they've been searching for all this time may have been much closer to them than they ever understood. But sometimes, people only truly understand what matters after life begins changing in ways they can no longer control. And honestly, I think that's exactly where this person is right now. There's a huge shift happening inside their energy. Not just emotionally, but within their relationships, their work, the way they see life, even the version of themselves they once believed they would always be. The Tower feels like a very powerful wake-up call here. Not necessarily everything collapsing all at once, but more like the things that no longer truly belong in their life are slowly beginning to fall away on their own. Controlling relationships. Environments where they constantly had to force themselves to survive. Connections that left them feeling empty even when surrounded by people. There are things they once believed they could never let go of. But now, they're beginning to realize those very things may have been pulling them further and further away from who they truly are. And the deeper they move through this phase, the more they understand why Capricorn's energy always felt so different. You never tried to drag them into your chaos. You never forced them to become who you wanted them to be. Capricorn simply tried to create a space where both of you could finally breathe. And sometimes, people only understand the value of peace after they become exhausted by endless emotional battles. The Five of Wands feels like intense inner conflict. One part of them wants to hold on to the old version of life simply because it feels familiar. But another part can no longer tolerate that version of themselves anymore. I think this person is beginning to see more clearly who truly cared about them, and who only stayed as long as they were useful or easy to control. Certain relationships are starting to reveal their toxicity. Certain conversations leave them feeling drained instead of healed. Certain environments make it impossible for them to fully be themselves. And strangely enough, the more they recognize all of that, the more they miss the peace they felt around Capricorn. The Seven of Wands carries the energy of someone finally learning how to protect themselves, no longer allowing other people to control their emotions or the direction of their life, no longer allowing chaotic energy to pull them back into old patterns so easily. This is the kind of transformation that happens very quietly on the outside, but internally, it feels like an enormous battle, because walking away from toxic cycles often means losing things that once felt familiar. And I think this person is learning that slowly, one step at a time. And honestly, Capricorn has unintentionally become the image that makes them want to live differently now. Not because you're perfect, but because around you, they experienced a calmer version of themselves. The Four of Pentacles feels like someone who spent a long time gripping tightly to everything out of fear of losing control. Holding emotions in, holding distance, holding on to pride for far too long. But the tighter they tried to hold everything together, the lonelier they became. And I think they're beginning to understand now that sometimes the more we try to control something, the easier it becomes to lose it, especially real love. Their life may still feel chaotic right now. There are still things inside themselves they haven't fully resolved yet. But at least now, they no longer want to keep returning to the old version of themselves just for temporary comfort. And honestly, real change often begins the moment someone becomes too exhausted to keep living the same way anymore. I think this person is slowly reaching a point where they no longer want to stay silent about what they truly feel anymore. Because the more they keep everything buried inside, the more they can feel the distance between the two of you growing little by little each day. There are things they've wanted to say for a very long time. Feelings they tried to hide because they were afraid of rejection, or because their pride convinced them that if they stayed quiet long enough, everything would somehow fix itself. But now, they're beginning to understand that some relationships, if they aren't honest enough, eventually get replaced by silence. The Page of Cups carries such a soft energy here, but it feels incredibly genuine. Like someone slowly learning how to open their heart again after locking their emotions away for too long. Maybe they still don't know where to begin. Maybe they still don't know how to explain everything that happened between you. But honestly, I think they're trying to gather the courage to face you in a way that's far more sincere than before. Capricorn isn't the kind of person who's easily moved by beautiful words alone. People like you can feel the truth behind what someone says. And maybe that's exactly why this person feels even more afraid to step forward now. They know you're no longer the version of yourself who would wait forever. No longer the person who overlooks every wound simply because you still care. So this time, it feels like they want things to be real. The Knight of Cups carries the energy of someone finally wanting to step outside their old emotional defenses. Not just watching you from afar anymore. Not just missing you quietly and disappearing again, but actually wanting to face their emotions directly. And honestly, I think there's so much this person wants to say to Capricorn. An apology for not being there when you needed them most. An explanation for the times they disappeared or hurt you without fully realizing it. And maybe even the regret of taking far too long to understand your value. Some people pass through our lives very quickly, but then there are people who, even after they're gone, still leave the heart unable to return to who it once was before them. Capricorn feels like that kind of person to them. Justice carries the energy of finally facing the consequences of past choices honestly. No more blaming circumstances. No more hiding emotions behind coldness or silence. This person is beginning to understand that if they truly hurt someone who loved them sincerely, then at the very least they should be mature enough to face that truth. And honestly, I think that realization has changed their energy completely. It no longer feels impulsive, no longer feels temporary. It feels slower now, deeper, more emotionally responsible. The Chariot carries the feeling of someone finally wanting to move forward instead of remaining emotionally stuck forever. Maybe they're still afraid, still worried that too much has changed, or that Capricorn may no longer be as open-hearted as before. But deep down, they know that if they continue staying silent, this regret may stay with them for a very long time. And sometimes, the hardest thing for a person isn't loving someone. It's finding the courage to finally speak the truth about what their heart has felt all along. And honestly, after all the silence, the missed chances, and the pain that was never fully spoken out loud, this connection feels like it's slowly moving into a different kind of energy now. More mature, slower, but also much more real. It no longer feels like the kind of connection that burns intensely and disappears overnight. No more emotional games where both people are left guessing what the other person truly feels. It feels like this person is finally understanding that what they truly need isn't a relationship that constantly throws their heart into chaos. What they need is a place where they feel safe enough to stay, and Capricorn carries that energy very naturally. The Emperor feels like someone learning how to become more responsible with their emotions. No longer acting only on impulse, no longer running away the moment feelings become too deep. I think this person is slowly learning what emotional maturity and love actually looks like. Not because someone forced them to change, but because they're beginning to realize that some people, once lost, are almost impossible to replace emotionally. And Capricorn feels like that kind of person to them. You carry such a grounded energy, practical, steady, but underneath all that calmness, there's an incredibly deep and sincere heart. And honestly, not everyone is patient enough to truly see that side of Capricorn. But once they do, it becomes very difficult to forget. The Empress carries the energy of someone who makes others want to build a more meaningful future. Not just because of love itself, but because of the healing they feel simply by being around you. Capricorn has this energy that makes people want to slow down, to stabilize their life, to love in a more mature way. And I think this person is slowly realizing that the peace they kept searching for in so many different places may have already existed when they were beside you. The Four of Wands feels like a connection slowly finding balance again after so much emotional turbulence. Not because everything suddenly became perfect, and not because every wound disappeared overnight, but because both people have clearly changed so much through everything they've been through.